What is up, NFL fans, and welcome back to another episode of the NFL Whip Round. I'm Jeff Hartman, joined by Coach Kevin Smith. Coach, the NFL draft is in the books. How's it going? What was your take?
Just dust settling right now, trying to wade through a lot of it. It's a hard thing to do these immediate assessments. People love to do them, but you try to be a little bit more objective and wait a hot minute before you start assigning grades on them. But I think for the most part, it was a draft that didn't offer a whole lot of surprise. A lot of interesting stuff, but not necessarily a real surprising draft.
I thought there were some surprises in round one, and we'll focus probably a lot on round one today and in this podcast as we digest the NFL draft. Let's start off with the basic question. What was your favorite pick? Doesn't have to be round one. I think we're probably going to focus there because it's a high talent. It's wherever all the best players are. What was your favorite pick? Did you have one, Coach?
I think a couple guys who I wouldn't say they necessarily fell because they still went in the top half of the first round, but I thought it was a big deal for the Giants to be able to get Francis Mauigoa, the tackle from Miami, because I think he can be a cornerstone of the line for that offense for the next decade. And then, man, Caleb Downs falling into the hands of the Cowboys. I know they traded up one pick to get him, probably just to ensure nobody else would come up and get him. But yeah, that's a guy who you can make a credible argument. He's the best overall player in this draft. So for him to slide to 11 to Dallas is great for the Cowboys. And as much as you and I try not to be homers and see things through a Pittsburgh lens, the opposite of that with the Ravens landing Vega Ione, I mean, as Steelers fans, you got to be like disappointed because I think so many Steelers fans wanted him. It's interesting. I had this conversation. I'll ask you this, Jeff. I had this conversation with somebody over the weekend. The Steelers beat the Ravens in the final game of the season to win the division.
Yeah.
And then got their ass kicked in the playoffs. By winning that game, they drafted 21st and the Ravens drafted 14th. Would you have rather the Steelers lost that game so the Steelers could pick 14th and possibly land Ione?
Hell no. Hell no.
I said the same thing.
I will take a regular season, and that felt like a playoff game anyways because there's a win and you're in situation. I'll take that over a draft pick any day of the week because sometimes these picks just don't pan out. Like you said, when the dust is just starting to settle, it's a little too early to hand out grades. So you went with obviously Caleb Downs. I would echo that, but I'm going to go with, I thought when I looked at this team and I still was kind of shocked that this player was available, I would say Sonny Styles to the Commanders. The Commanders were still leaning on Bobby Wagner as of last year. This guy is ridiculously athletic. Dan Quinn is a defensive coach. You have to get a feeling that he's going to know how to use him in Washington. I didn't think he would be there at 7. I honest to God didn't, but you saw players like Carnell Tate go to Tennessee, Jeremiah Love go at Arizona. So I'm going to say Sonny Styles. And then also the Chiefs being aggressive and going up and getting Mansour Delane out of LSU. They needed that cornerback. They needed that secondary piece. Now, whether you believe in him as a top-tier corner in the league, that's your decision. But, Coach, what did you think about those two picks, which just happened to be 6 and 7 in round one?
I think the Sonny Styles pick is great because he's a leader, and he's a guy that made over 40 starts at Ohio State. He's got Bobby Wagner-type attributes. And I think you're going to be able to plug him in and he'll be the captain of your defense, that green dot guy. And it's hard to find those guys. Delane, I love the player. I wonder, did Kansas City have to go up 3 picks to get him? Because they traded a 3rd and a 5th to get him, which is fairly significant for a team that didn't have a lot of draft picks to begin with. So, but obviously the Trent McDuffie trade made them feel like they had to do something aggressive. I just don't know if they could have sat there at 9 and picked him.
All right, so now let's transition to players drafted into what we'll deem ideal situations. So these are players that it doesn't mean that they're going to play right now, but they went to a program, and we're talking about NFL organization, that it just fits. It just feels like it's in lockstep. Where are you thinking here, Coach, with this category?
Yeah, well, I'll take the 2 quarterbacks that went in round 1. I think Mendoza's in a great spot in Vegas for 2 reasons. One, the scheme fit with Clint Kubiak and what he wants to do. I think there's a lot of Sam Darnold's game in Mendoza. And then you look at what Kubiak did with Sam Darnold in Seattle last year. and it feels like it's going to translate well to what Mendoza does. And then the fact that he doesn't have to play right away, he's going to sit behind Kirk Cousins. And I don't think you could find a better mentor for Fernando Mendoza than Kirk Cousins. So that feels like the fit and then the ability to sit and learn for a little bit. Great situation. And Ty Simpson's in a great situation. I don't know if Sean McVay's thrilled to have him. I mean, we saw plenty of clips, right? You saw plenty of clips over the weekend where it seemed to indicate that. And I don't blame Sean McVay, quite honestly, because you've got a win now. You've got a Super Bowl contender in LA, and you're picking 13th with the opportunity to land a lot of impact players who can help your team right now. And you chose a guy who may never see the field for you. And if he does, it's probably 2 years down the road. But if you're Ty Simpson, the opportunity for similar reasons, the scheme fit, and then to learn from McVay, to be tutored by Stafford, to not have to be rushed into the lineup. I mean, that's about as good as it gets for first round picks.
I'm surprised you went with Ty Simpson because McVay, like everyone saw the clips. He was visibly not in agreement with his GM as it pertains to this selection. He was like, he's going to compete with Stetson Bennett. And that's what he's going to, that's, I didn't understand that selection at 13. Maybe they had some intel that a team like the Jets might be trying to get Ty Simpson with their second first round pick. It felt unnecessary. We'll put it that way, Coach. What was your take on just the selection and the timing of it with Ty Simpson?
I don't like it for the Rams for all the reasons you said. Yeah, for all the reasons you just said. But I love it for Ty Simpson because
makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, if he's going to be given a legitimate shot, and you have to believe he is, like Sean McVay is not going to not coach the guy because he didn't like him. He's not going to be like, oh, he's clearly better than Stetson Bennett, but I didn't like the pick, so I'm not playing him. Like people don't do that. So yeah, I mean, given that they had the opportunity to draft Mekhi Lemon there, you would think like, oh man, with Puka Nacua, I don't know what's going on with him, but Devontae Adams is getting to be to the end of his career. It looked like, boy, there's a chance to get an impact receiver right away. But obviously, Les Snead had a little bit of a different idea.
Well, my best fit is unfortunately one you already brought up, and that's Vega Ioane from Penn State going to Baltimore. I mean, when you saw the pick being made, and I know we were doing the live draft party, and it just felt, all these Steeler fans, it just felt like a kick in the nuts because the Steelers were hoping that player was going to fall to 21 somehow, or even if he gets past Baltimore, maybe the Steelers would trade up and get him, and they take him. And it just feels like a perfect fit. You've got this big bruising guy. You got Derrick Henry as a running back. I mean, it just seems perfect. It makes me sick to my stomach to say that, but at the same time, I'm not trying. Okay, I got to take the Steelers garb off for a second. You talked about it briefly, but Coach, but you still think that you would agree that's a great fit?
Oh, absolutely. And you can see why the Steelers and the Ravens have been consistently good for a long time and have dominated that division. They are always, every draft, it seems, they're interested in the same guys, the same types of guys, whether it was Mark Andrews back in the day or Tyler Linderbaum, the center. And if we thought about it, we could probably name a half a dozen guys that the Ravens have taken that the Steelers really liked, and vice versa. They're comparable organizations with a similar mindset. And so it makes sense that they're competing for the same guys in the draft.
Just out of curiosity, did you hear the story that the owner, Steve Bisciotti of the Ravens, he went into the war room in the 5th round and said, I'm making a pick, and he picked the running back that they took in the 5th round? Did you hear about that?
I didn't. Was Bisciotti like dipping into the liquor cabinet early? I don't know. Or was he just having his Jerry Jones moment? I don't know.
It was the Jerry Jones moment. But the fact that DaCosta, the GM of the Ravens, came out and said, yeah, he's the owner of the team. What am I going to say? No. I'm like, yeah, sure, Steve, you get a pick. And so he took this running back. Just wild stuff. Okay, let's go to the opposite of what we just talked about. Ideal fit, perfect, meshes ideally with the player and the prospect and the situation with the organization. Let's do the opposite. A player whose draft fit could actually hurt their progress and their development in the NFL. Who you got?
I just didn't like Arizona taking Jeremiah Love. As good as he is, I'm a big believer that the running back comes at the end of the process, not at the beginning. And if you're Arizona, you need so much talent in so many other places that it feels like they're putting the cart before the horse there, right? You look at their offensive line, terrible last year. And granted, they got Chase Bisontis a pretty good guard out of Texas A&M in the second round. And I don't think there was a lineman there at number 3 that they could have taken, but they stunk on defense last year. And you had studs available to you at pick number 3 on defense, whether it was Reese or whether it was Styles or whether it was Caleb Downs. I mean, there were just dudes on the defensive side of the ball. And I think Jeremiah Love's going to be a really good running back. But, look what happened to Saquon Barkley when he was with the Giants for all those years. He just got his brains beaten in. And the Giants never were able to, they had one playoff year, but for the most part were terrible. And then Barkley goes to Philly and suddenly, he's the best back in the league. So I just fear something like that will happen to Jeremiah Love.
I see your Jeremiah Love, and I raise you a Carnell Tate, which went right after to Tennessee. It's not that Cam Ward doesn't need weapons. He does. But Cam Ward also, you mentioned getting your brains bashed in. The guy was pressured so much last year. He was sacked. Was he sacked most of any quarterback with the qualifying starts? Do you know that off the top of your head?
I know that there was late in the season, he was first. I know that.
Yeah.
But I don't know where he finished.
Going wide receiver with a lot of offensive linemen still on the board. Actually, they could have had their choice of offensive linemen to help build up the protection for your number 1 overall quarterback in 2025. I don't know. What did you think of Carnell Tate? Because again, like you said, if you're building from the trenches out, Carnell Tate shouldn't have been the pick. It would have been, let's take one of the tackles, maybe interior guy. What do you think?
I don't know. I won't say it's a bad pick. I really like Carnell Tate. I like him a lot. But you look at what they did offensively or what they did in the draft, and they didn't address the offensive line till the 5th round.
Yeah.
I mean, at that point, and then they took a 6th round center. I mean, at that point, those are throwing dart at a dartboard type picks. So it feels again as though you're not going to be able to get what you want out of those skill guys unless you can be, I don't even want to say dominant, competent up front. And they're not there yet. So I agree with you. I just feel as though I don't want to call them luxury picks, but I don't feel like the priorities are in order.
I like Carnell Tate too, but what pass is he going to catch if his quarterback's staring up at the sky every single time he drops back to pass? I just don't understand some of these things. Now, let me ask you another question. Players, and you mentioned one, and I'll bring him up as an example. I never thought Caleb Downs would get out of the top 10, and he gets selected 11th overall by the Dallas Cowboys. Were you surprised by any players that fell in the draft that you thought would go much higher? Does anyone fall into that category? I got a couple that I have on the top of my brain, but I'm curious where you're thinking.
Well, clearly you look at what happened with Makai Lemon. And I think that the personal interviews wound up mattering more than people thought. And everybody, I've talked about how when I was at the combine and we were all standing there, all the media people looking at him as he went through his interview and thinking to ourselves, what the hell's going on here?
Yeah.
And I think you got a glimpse of that when you saw his on-stage interview at the draft with the sunglasses on. I mean, looking around, no disrespect to Stevie Wonder, but it looked like he was doing a Stevie Wonder impersonation, it was weird, and I think he turned some teams off, but the guy who fell that Downs was one, but Ruben Bain out of Miami, I think he's going to be a dude in the NFL. And I think for Tampa Bay to get him all the way down at 15 is a big deal for them.
Yeah, they needed that help there. I was going to go Makai Lemon for sure. I was shocked that Dylan Thieneman didn't go till 25. He goes to Chicago. He was someone that everyone said he's not going to get past Minnesota at 18. That's their pick. Harrison Smith ends his career. And there you go. Let's just continue that tradition of that type of safety. They go with Caleb Banks. What was your thoughts on Thieneman falling that far?
I talked to our good friend Dave Stefano, First and Skull Vikings Network here at Fans First, and he seemed to think that the word within the Minnesota locker room was that Thieneman's not a great fit for Brian Flores' defense. So that maybe they just didn't like the scheme fit there. I was a little surprised that he fell that far. I mean, he just was like the hot name coming out of the combine. I thought the Chargers might take him at 22, but obviously they passed as well. So yeah, a couple guys who just went a little bit later, but there were some surprise picks, right? I don't think Miami took Caden Proctor at 12. I think that was a surprise. The Rams taking Ty Simpson at 13. bit of a surprise. That pushes some of those other guys a little bit further down. The Saints taking Jordan Tyson all the way up at number 8. That was a little bit of a risky pick given his injury history. So that contributed to some of these other guys falling a bit.
Well, I was going to talk to you. The next was about the surprises about when players were drafted. Like, I don't know. Did you see Spencer Fano as a top 10 selection? He goes to the Browns at number 9. I also look at a player like Kenyon Sadiq going to the Jets at 16. And I keep on saying the same thing. Like, who's going to throw him the football? I know Geno Smith is there, but I don't know. Were there any players that shocked you as when they went in terms of not a reach? Because I hate that term, because if a team likes a player, get your player. I don't want to say that. But, man, when you looked at your own board, like, I can't believe that player went there. So you already mentioned a couple. What do you think about someone like Fano going to Cleveland at 9 and some of the other players, man, whatever falls into that category for you?
I guess Cleveland felt as though they had some flexibility. They picked up a couple extra picks by moving back in that trade with Kansas City from 6 to 9. So they felt as though they were going to be able to address some of their other needs. And quite frankly, I thought they did a great job in the draft. A lot of talk about maybe Carnell Tate would go to them at number 6. They move back 3 spots. They get Fano, and then they pick up Concepcion and Boston later in the draft. So I thought the Browns did a good job. I mean, if you're going to take a guy ahead of where he's projected, I have no problem with that for the same reason you said. Like, if you like your guy, go get your guy. But you better have a plan for him. Like if you're the Jets and you take Kenyon Sadiq, who is, they don't call him Sadiq the Freak for nothing. I mean, he's ridiculously athletic. But like, he's a tweener. He's a 6'3", 240-pound, quote-unquote tight end who's not going to put his hand down and block defensive linemen. So what's your plan for him? Right? If you don't have a plan for a guy like that, then they're going to get a little bit lost in the shuffle. That's why I thought Sadiq would be a great fit in Kansas City, because that they'll know how to use a guy like that. Will the Jets?
All right. Okay, let's talk about something which I found fascinating. And during the draft, I actually was writing down for round 1 only, trades. Now, last year in 2025, there were 4 trades in the first round. They doubled that number in round 1 in 2026. Now, my question for you, Coach, is do you think there's a correlation in any way between the amount of trades that happened and the draft class in and of itself? Now, before we hit record, you said that maybe it had something to do with the time being cut down from 10 minutes to 8. I don't know. I don't know if I agree with that, but I want to give you your chance to say what you think. What do you think about all those trades that happened in round 1?
First of all, about the time, the 2 minutes doesn't seem like a big deal, but I was watching it on ESPN. It was unbelievable how fast you went from one. The picks announced. The guy takes 2 minutes to walk out from the green room to bro hug Roger Goodell and do his interview. They run a highlight package, and then boom, the next pick is in. And it didn't feel like, if you're on the clock, that you got a whole lot of time. Like, you need to have your plan ready. You need to know what you're going to do. So maybe a lot of those trade conversations took place earlier. NFL owners meetings a couple weeks ago. A lot of guys talking to one another. And now you just have to say, you pick up the phone and be like, hey, look, remember that trade we talked about 2 weeks ago? Are we in on that? That could be a reason. But you have a good point about the draft class, because it wasn't one where you had a lot of elite talent, but you had a lot of good football players in the range, in that like 20 to 60 or 75 range. A lot of good guys that teams may have decided it's worth maneuvering around a little bit later in the draft than it is in round 1.
I was stunned by how many trades there were. And a lot of them were back end of the draft trades. And you talk about the Philadelphia trade, which I'm going to get to that in a second. But after that trade, Houston goes up to 26, trading with Buffalo. Miami goes to 27, trading with the 49ers. New England goes up to 28, trading with Buffalo. Buffalo was just like, we're trading everything. They had 3 first-round trade backs, the Buffalo Bills did. The New York Jets trade with the 49ers, go to 30, and Tennessee goes back into the first round to get 31 with Buffalo. Buffalo kicked the can all the way out of the first round into the second. I think that this was one of those situations where the draft class, like you mentioned, it fell off quickly. And people said, I don't care. Like, let's go up and get the player that we really like, or let's trade back in Buffalo's case because we're not in love with any of the players that are currently available, and let's get more capital for future rounds. But I do want to talk about that Dallas trade and the Steelers. First and foremost, what is your take on division trades. I could not imagine, we're Steeler fans here, that the Baltimore Ravens call Pittsburgh and say, we want to jump up in front of this team. Do you want to make a trade? I can't imagine the Steelers saying, yeah, sure, let's do it. But they did. The Dallas Cowboys accepted that trade with Philadelphia, and that led to that awkward moment with Mekhi Lemon being on the phone with Omar Khan. And then the Philadelphia Eagles, his agent rushes in. Have you seen the video, Coach?
Yeah, oh yeah.
It's pretty damning on a lot of fronts. The Steelers are breaking an NFL rule by contacting a player before they're on the clock. What's your take on divisional trades there and the Steelers' situation in and of itself?
And it's even more confounding when you consider the fact that A.J. Brown to the Bills is just an open secret now. And you knew that the Eagles were going up to get a receiver. So you're helping your division rival get a replacement for their top receiver. That was mind-boggling to me.
I know.
It's bad business by the Steelers. Because on two fronts. One, to call Mekhi Lemon before you're on the clock is just stupid because the agent, everybody knows if you're that agent, there's nothing stopping you from now saying to the Eagles, the Steelers are on the phone with them right now. Like they're going to take them. And then the other thing is, I don't know if you heard this, and this is not confirmed, so I'm not here to spread rumors, but this sounds like a very likely scenario that with Mike McCarthy having a lot of former Cowboy coaches on his staff in Pittsburgh and a lot of connections still to the Cowboys, that somebody in Dallas texting somebody in Pittsburgh, hey, who you guys taking? And we're taking Lemon. And then suddenly the Cowboys are like, well, let's see if we can generate some interest and gather up some extra picks by passing this information along. That's bad practice, bad business by the Steelers all around.
And then also the fact that the video gets public, if it turns public, like the ESPN, NFL Network, they're owned by the same company now, the same entity. They chose to let that get out there. I'm sure the Steelers weren't happy about that, especially as the city of Pittsburgh hosts the draft. I just out of curiosity, as a quick side note, the Steelers ended up going up and getting Jeremy Bernard in round 2 out of Alabama. Do you like their offense better with Bernard than Lemon if they would have gotten Mekhi Lemon and Philadelphia didn't go up and get him?
100%. I have not been a Mekhi Lemon fan for as far as fit is concerned in Pittsburgh. I think he's a great player, but I didn't love him, and I love Jeremy Bernard. I think Jeremy Bernard does everything that the Steelers really need, and so Dallas may have wound up saving Pittsburgh from themselves.
That's true. Now let's do the flip side. Philadelphia, who, as you said, it's a foregone conclusion they're going to trade A.J. Brown. They draft Mekhi Lemon. That doesn't feel like a 1-for-1. Both stylistically, size, all of it. A.J. Brown is a physical presence, a physical force. Mekhi Lemon's kind of a slot receiver. What do you think about this from the Philadelphia perspective, going and getting Mekhi Lemon?
Yeah, it certainly doesn't. You don't replace A.J. Brown with Mekhi Lemon. You plug Mekhi Lemon into your offense, but he doesn't take A.J. Brown's position. So that is interesting. Yeah, the Eagles made some moves in the offseason, to acquire some wide receivers. And I think that they probably feel they can take the committee approach and replace A.J. Brown. Can they? I don't know. I look at the guys that they brought in. They brought in, Hollywood Brown. How much does he have left? They brought in, I guess, Dontavian Wicks. He's a pretty good player, but none of those are going to really replace A.J. Brown. So, on my podcast on Monday, I had, one of my guests, big time Eagles fan, he's a homer. I mean, big time homer. And he thinks it's going to be seamless. Mekhi Lemon, they need a yak guy. They need a guy with a better clubhouse guy. I'm like, is the Mekhi Lemon going to be a better clubhouse guy? I mean, I don't know. I have a lot of questions there.
It does seem like, and again, this is just an outsider's take. Mekhi Lemon could be like you're trading one headache for another, but does he have the upside of A.J. Brown? Because we've seen A.J. Brown take over football games, and the way you're describing Mekhi Lemon is he's not that guy, like a slot receiver, unless you're someone that's like a absolute freak phenom, like we're talking about primetime Cooper Kupp when he was in LA, and it just is unlikely to happen. We'll put it that way. What's the Philly fan base? What are they? How are they taking this?
They like Lemon, and they like that they're getting a receiver to replace Brown. And to be fair to Mekhi Lemon, he makes explosive plays. He's great with the ball in his hands, but he relied a lot on 50-50 catches in college. He's 5'11". Like you don't win those balls regularly,
right?
Unless you're like a 6'4" leaper in the pros.
Yeah. All right. Last question before we get to our profile. How long do you think we should wait before assigning a grade to a draft class? Obviously, less than 48 hours afterwards is way too early. But what is your timeline in terms of, okay, we've seen enough. Let's slap a grade on these players.
Yeah. I mean, all right, I'll make a parallel to high school, or, like being a high school coach for so long. The number of freshmen who walk in and are ready to play varsity football right away is very slim.
Yeah.
Sophomore year is oftentimes like an acclimation process for your better kids, where they're going to earn a varsity letter, maybe as a special teams player or a role player. And junior year, your third year, is where you expect them to really become an impact player. In the NFL draft, I think your first and second rounders have to be your freshmen and sophomores who are ready to step in and contribute early. And then if you're lucky, you get some mid-rounders who maybe by their junior year, they become a starter or a guy who is a contributor. And I mean, so for me, that you're talking 3 years, like if you're assigning grades before you get to a third year, you're jumping the gun, because a lot of these guys just aren't ready to be NFL players until you get a couple years in.
I think it also depends on the prospect. I agree with the 3-year timeline first and foremost, but let's take a look at a late round draft pick, and they have a very specialized role for why they were drafted. I'll give you an example of this year's draft class. The Pittsburgh Steelers in the 4th round take Caden Weegan out of Iowa. He is a return man. He is going to have a role in his first year with the Steelers. He's going to be returning kicks and punts. Okay, you're going to get more of a sample size in that role than you would, say, someone that's more of a developmental player. Even go back to, a number of players. I could give you a million of Steelers examples, but no one wants to hear that. Weegan's going to be able to be graded a little bit sooner in that role, but as a wide receiver or someone else, like, it's going to take him time. He's got to get acclimated to Mike McCarthy's offense. Does he fit? What does it look like? Are they going to have special packages? All that stuff. The same could be said about the 7th round pick, Eli Heinrich, the Navy cadet who was drafted by the Steelers. Super talented, but they got to find a role for him. I think the more specialized your role is, the more. But nonetheless, I think that, you can assess those specialized players a little bit earlier grade, but still it's going to take time. What's your take on all that?
I agree. And you also have to consider what are teams doing with certain picks. Like the Eagles in the 7th round, they took this kid Bernard from Nigeria, who has never played football, and he is a physical monster and
chiseled.
Right, at 300 pounds, chiseled, like 6% body fat, and ran like a crazy 40 and had a 38-inch vertical, and like the testing numbers are through the roof, but like there's a really good chance he's never going to pan out, and I think that you have to expect that with some of these picks, that you have to realize not every pick is a guy that the team is figuring in on making the roster. Every once in a while, you take that lottery pick, and you say like, hey, if we hit it here, wonderful. If not, what do they cost us?
Right. And there's a lot of Steeler fans that are, with that, the Eli Heinrich, or Heidenreich, I think is how you say his name, 7th round pick. He has testing numbers similar to Christian McCaffrey. And everyone's like, oh my gosh, like the Steelers got, no, they didn't get Christian McCaffrey. Okay. Christian McCaffrey was a 1 of 1 coming out of Stanford. This guy just has similar testing scores. Could they get something out of him? Possibly. A lot of that's going to fall on Mike McCarthy to be able to get him into an offense that can accentuate what he does best, which was a great story, Coach. Any thoughts on that? The Navy cadets going to his hometown team, being in the green room, going out on the stage with a terrible towel. I just want to get your take on that.
Yeah, that kid, the McCaffrey comparison, it's not that far-fetched. He's not McCaffrey. You're 100% right. But stylistically, he looks a lot like him when he runs routes. I mean, at Navy, they're running the double wing triple option, so he's more of a slot receiver for them, or a slot back, they call it, than he is a true tailback. So he's doing tons of things. He blocks, he catches, he runs great routes, he can run the ball. I would be surprised if he didn't make the roster in some way, shape, or form.
All right. Yeah, I agree. It's going to be fascinating. Let's finish this up with a player profile. We got the Mr. Irrelevant, Red Murdoch. What do you think about this player? In this, Red Murdoch, he was Mr. Irrelevant. I'm learning about him as I look down at my phone. He's a linebacker. He was drafted by the Denver Broncos. What do you think, Coach?
I don't think that anybody's ever going to hear Red Murdoch's name after today.
Sounds like a guy from an old Western, like a spaghetti Western. Like,
well, when you think about the name Red, what movie comes to mind? Come on, you got to know this.
Well, it's a Shawshank Redemption.
Yeah, thank you very much. If you didn't know that, I would have to end this podcast immediately.
I love those. I'm not a sci-fi guy, but I do love those type of movies. Yeah.
Yeah, but I just like the idea of Mr. Irrelevant. I like how it started. A former player, a guy who played in the NFL way back in the 1940s, and he was in the league for 2 years. But still, he was in the league, and he just felt like people were getting dumped on if they were like late round draft picks. And his whole thing was, look, if you get drafted into the NFL, you're one of the best in the world at what you do. The odds of being drafted into the NFL are less than 0.5%. So let's like celebrate these guys. And he started this Mr. Irrelevant thing. And there've been a couple, like Ryan Suckup, the kicker, has played more games than any Mr. Irrelevant ever taken. And of course, everybody's familiar with Brock Purdy. Every once in a while, one of these guys hits. I think it's cool, man. They take you to Disney World. They throw you, Disney World. They throw you a parade. You have an irrelevant week. There's a banquet. A lot of the other Mr. Irrelevant show up. They present you with a trophy. They call it the Lozman instead of the Heisman. Like, they're having a lot of fun with this, man, and as they should.
Khalil Elijah Murdoch is his full name. He goes by Red. Again, sounds just like I'm imagining John Wayne. Was that you, Red Murdoch? I think that's. Anyways,
this is probably the most airtime that any podcast is doing on Red Murdoch, by the way.
That's right. You're exactly right. And we're going to have more discussion and debate about this 2026 NFL draft in the coming weeks. But this was a good show to kind of like initially talk about it. We're just hitting the top of this draft class. But Coach, I know you got some more coming from the call sheet. What's coming up this week?
Yeah. If you get a chance, check out Monday's show. Gary Rickey, who was our starting quarterback in college when I played in college, Wayne Mazzoni, college baseball coach for over 30 years, Eagles fan, Jets fan, Steelers fan, all talking about the draft. But the interesting part of the conversation is we're talking about the conditions and the variables that lead to the success of players once they reach the pros, and making some parallels between college coaching, et cetera. So great show with those guys.
All right, so make sure you check that out wherever you get your podcast by searching The Call Sheet Daily with Kevin Smith. You can check out his work and mine at the Steel Curtain Network. Wherever you get your podcast, search Steel Curtain Network and SteelCurtainNetwork.com. Coach, thanks for another great show. We'll see you next week. Take it easy.